The cemetery bell tolls at an hour no priest would claim. A cart creaks back through the gate, lighter than it left, its boards sweating vinegar and night. Shovels lean like tired men. A sack of lime slumps open. The torch smoke hangs low enough to whisper, "Where's the boy?" Someone asks, and for a moment the graveyard is only breath. The apprentice's cap sits on the cart rail, damp with fog, as if it waited there for instructions. No footprints leave the mud. No watchman saw the side door open. They say a physician came to help the pit keep its pace. Black book, quiet voice, promises that smelled like herbs. He took bodies for fumigation to slow the plague's hunger. He wrote names carefully, then crossed them out carefully, then wrote them again as initials that looked like numbers. Learning how to count. Tonight, the count is wrong. The cart returned. The bell explained nothing. And the pit, which eats everything, will not say what it was fed. Asterisk, you're watching The Macabre Physician. Subscribe for more historical horror. SIENA 1348. The pit behind the church swallows daylight and names. Gravediggers move like clockwork. Climb, prayer, earth, repentant, till a physician arrives with a black book and a remedy that sounds like order. He speaks of miasmas and fumigation, of smoke that tames contagion if the bodies are taken aside for cleansing. The foreman bargains in whispers. The city wants speed more than ritual. The bell learns new hours to toll. The apprentice, eager for wages and answers, keeps pace at the physician's elbow. He ties tags to wrists, notes, rings, and scars, lifts one end of the stretcher when the other end is faith. The physician praises his steadiness and teaches him a smaller alphabet. Initials where names had been. Numerals where sorrow would crowd the line. At dusk, a cart leaves with fewer witnesses than it gathered. By midnight, lists that once held full names close like mouths. In the ledger, the day becomes 2 columns, trained to agree. And somewhere between the pit and a locked door that smells of vinegar and smoke, the boy's path disappears, not with a scream, but with a careful stroke of ink. Asterisk, he began with courtesy, because courtesy disarms a bout to the foreman, a clean cloth laid over a barrel. The black book opened where everyone could see names become lines. "Let us spare the living," he said, voice level as a plum. "Smoke first, burial after. The pit will breathe easier." The foreman, who had learned to count by weight, not prayer, nodded. Fewer bodies at once meant fewer questions from the families who hovered at the fence. The apprentice hovered 2 quick hands, a chip in his tooth, a habit of looking where men told him not to. He carried the physician's brazier as if it were a small sun and watched how vinegar woke a sting in the air. He learned the new alphabet, N, A, B, beside marks that looked like tides, short, long, slack. "Initials are faster," the physician said, not looking up. "Speed is a kindness." They made a place beside the charnel shed, a table leveled by a wedge, a hook for the lantern, a curtain to keep wind from interrupting the smoke. "We will cleanse a handful before dawn," the physician told the foreman. "The pit will take cleaner air. Your men will take cleaner sleep." A purse changed hands lightly, as if the coins were shy. The boy tied tags with careful knots and practiced silence. He noticed that full names filled the book at dusk, and initials replaced them by midnight. He noticed that the census chain counted time more strictly than the bell. He noticed that the physician's shadow did not hurry, even when the cart did dart near last light. The physician picked 4 from the evening's harvest. No kin watching. No rings worth argument. No eyes left to accuse. "These first," he said. "Lime after." The apprentice shouldered one end of the stretcher, surprised at the heat that lingered through the linen. "We're helping," the physician said, and the word landed like a hand on the boy's back. Steadying and directing. Inside the shed, the curtain drew a quieter world. The physician set the brazier breathing, turned the wick until the flame behaved. and wrote a tidy I beside the boy's tag. The apprentice frowned. "You wrote me." "I wrote with you," the physician corrected, closing the book, "so we do not lose count." Outside, the pit accepted what it was given. Inside, Smoke forgot to leave. When the cart creaked out for the last pass of the night, the apprentice reached for his cap and found only fog. The foreman marked for fewer on his slate and for fewer questions at the fence. No one counted the boy, not yet. The physician wound the censer once more, and the chain's soft music decided what the bell would say later. Asterisk at dawn, the pit steamed like bread. The foreman swore by speed and lime. The physician swore by smoke. He told the men the air would grow gentler if a few bodies were prepared. First, less stench, fewer flies, safer prayers. He spoke as if mercy had measurements. The bell agreed with a single, tidy stroke. The apprentice did not come with a second cart. "Sent to fetch oil," the physician said, not looking up from the ledger. He tapped a column where initials lined up like obedient soldiers. The foreman, who hated questions that made work slower, nodded and shouted for shovels. Men obeyed. The pit swallowed. By midday, the shed became a liturgy. Brazier, wick, draft, tag, entry, ash. The physician drew curtains tight so the smoke would take instruction. He lowered light until it lay on surfaces like a hand that had already blessed. On the table, vials stood at attention. Beside them, a rag that smelt of vinegar and secrets. The ledger thickened with abbreviations: XP, Rev, Kamal. The words tidy people use when they cannot afford to write fear. A woman at the fence asked after a boy with a chipped tooth. "He worked the night shift," she said, tipping her chin at the foreman. "You still have his cap?" The foreman promised to ask. The physician promised to send word. Promises blow well in cemetery wind. The bell tolled oddly at none, a hiccup in the day. A gravedigger swore he saw the shed door open to let smoke out and nothing else. Another noticed the censor's chain had learned the bell's rhythm and taught it back. Toward evening, the physician requested for more for cleansing. He chose with a glance tags, without kin, names that would not be missed loudly. "The smoke spares the living," he reminded, and the foreman repeated it like doctrine. The cart creaked away. The fence emptied of petitioners. The pit learned to wait. Inside the shed, the air grew thick enough to memorize. The physician set a small stool where a boy might have sat, then moved it aside, as if correcting a sentence. He wrote a neat I again in the margin and boxed it. Beside it, a numeral. Beside that, a time. When the cart returned, the foreman counted bodies the way a man counts death's twice. Then, once more. "Where's the apprentice?" he asked finally, to no one who would have to stop working to answer. The physician closed the ledger with the quiet pride a teacher might feel at a lesson learned. "Cleansing," he said, and the word left the shed without making a sound. Asterisk. The shed had a throat. Behind the stacked crates and the pails of lime, a trapdoor yawned where the boards ran darker. The foreman thought it was for drainage. The physician knew it was for order. He lifted the ring with two gloved fingers and let a cooler breath rise with salt, the faint sweetness of spent herbs. A lamp went down first, then the black book, then the censer whose chain kept a perfect time. The cellar was the size of a short memory, low ceiling, beams, sweating, a table plain smooth where hands had learned to move without noise. Linen screens sectioned the room into suggestions. Tools lay in rows under cloth like obedient thoughts. Nothing glinted. Everything waited. He arranged the space as a teacher arranges chalk and slate. A mark on the floor for the stool, another for the brazier, a third for the place where a wrist would find the right height for counting. On the wall, the shadow of the beak became a metronome. The smoke learned to climb in quiet spirals and stay. When the door above closed, the cellar forgot the language of day. The physician opened his book to a clean page and drew the same neat eye he had boxed before, then wrote a numeral, then another. "So we do not lose count," he said, as if the walls needed reminding. The censers swung once, twice. The lamp made a small halo on the table's edge. Footsteps crossed the boards, overhead shovels, wheels, the foreman's bark. They receded like a tide called to other shores. In the stillness beneath, a lighter sound remained, the soft hitch of breath that knows it has been heard. The physician set 2 fingers to a pulse and let his own slow to match it. "Good," he murmured. "We will teach the air to behave." He spoke the rituals of cleansing as if to a diligent apprentice, straps in sips, wicks lowered, the virtue of measured dark. He praised steadiness, corrected fidgets, rewarded quiet with quieter. A cap lay folded on a crate, damp with fog and handled often enough to forget its shape. Beside it, a tag with a full name crossed through once, then twice, then rewritten as initials that looked like a door closed from the inside. Above, the bell fumbled for an hour and found none. Below, the chain marked 1, then 2, then 3. The book received the times without protest, somewhere between ink and breath. A boy became a column that added cleanly to itself when the lamp guttered. The physician trimmed it with care a father might envy. He set the cap on the stool, considered it, then placed it out of sight behind a screen. The smoke obeyed, memorizing the room again. "We are making the pit easier to bear," he said to the cellar, which did not argue. "We are sparing the living." The page ended with a final numeral and a small cross-knotted prayer. Only a hinge. He closed the book and listened to the silence he had taught the cellar to keep. Above, wheels creaked. Below, the air was ready for the next lesson. Asterisks whined worried the cemetery, pulling torch smoke sideways and making the lime hiss like a snake. A gravedigger, chasing a loose shroud, caught instead a sheet that skittered from the shed. Dora page, slick with vinegar scent. Not a prayer. Columns, initials to the left, numbers to the right, small verbs between them turned, exposed, calmed. At the bottom, a tidy box. I followed by a time. He brought it to the foreman, who read the way a man reads a bill he hopes belongs to someone else. "Procedure," the physician said gently, appearing at his shoulder as if the page had summoned him. "We keep the air from learning panic, okay?" The foreman tucked the paper into his belt. Near the purse, the physician had already weighed down at the fence. A woman with flour on her sleeves pointed at the apprentice's cap hanging from a peg. "He wore that last night." "He's on an errand," the foreman said. Voice bristled. "Then why does the bell toll odd?" Another asked, as the old iron gave a single, misplaced note that left the air unfinished. Twilight thinned. The physician requested for cleansing, and his glance chose them before his finger did. Tags no one would argue for, names that would not be shouted at dawn. The cart groaned toward the shed. Smoke thickened like a decision. Inside, the foreman found the ledger open to the latest page. The left-hand column had once been a list of whole names: Giorgio, Rafa, Alana, but someone had pressed a strip of oilcloth over them and rubbed until the ink sighed into blur. Beside the blur, initials stood fresh and obedient. At the margin, a note: Bell 1, 2. "Wait, what does it mean?" he asked, not to the room, but to the quiet it had learned. "That the pit will sleep easier," the physician said. And the sentence fit the shed, the way a lid fits a jar. The foreman took a step toward the inner curtain and felt the air change cooler, sweeter, the way a church feels before anyone speaks. "Boy," he called, because names like apprentice had begun to feel like lies. The curtain did not move. The censor's chain answered instead, counting a rhythm the bell would imitate later. Back outside, the page the wind had delivered made another circuit: foreman to parish clerk, clerk to priest, priest to pocket, growing heavier with each transfer, though it did not gain weight. The priest said words about sanitary inventory and charity to the living. The fence said nothing, learning to fear tidy handwriting. When night settled, the cart returned without complaint. The physician closed the ledger with a touch that looked like blessing. "We are nearly done," he said to the foreman. "One more lesson for the heir and the boy." The foreman asked finally, as if paying a debt late. The physician held the silence as a craftsman holds a tool. "Counting prevents loss," he said. "You hired me to count." The bell tolled once, then again, then chose an hour no priest would claim. The pit listened. The shed remembered how to lock itself. In the ledger, patient as stone, waited for its last line. Asterisk, asterisk, night fell without edges. The shed door resisted, then yielded to the foreman's keys with a tired click. Smoke stood in the room like a congregation that had already agreed. On the table, neatly folded linens, files, capped and clean. The ledger, waiting with its spine warm from a lamp. "Boy," the foreman called, not loudly, because loudness felt like a lie. The censor's chain answered 1, 2, then stilled. Behind the curtain, the cellar's breath rose faint and disciplined. He lifted the trapdoor. Air came up cold and sweet, smelling of cow and something like sleep. The stairs were shorter than fear. At the bottom, the world had been arranged to prefer silence. Screens making corridors of dusk. A stool tucked to keep a path clear. A cap folded on a crate, as if it had always been a square of cloth and not a promise. The foreman touched it, and his hand remembered heat that should have left hours ago. "Procedure," said a voice behind him, kind, instructional, the way a teacher names tools before a lesson. The physician stood with the ledger under one arm and the censer in his other hand. "We have spared the living. The pit will rest." "The boy," the foreman said, because all other words had become initials. "Where is he?" The physician opened the ledger to the last page. On the left, initials marched. On the right, numbers agreed. In the margin, boxed and neat, a single mark. "I." He tapped it once with a gloved finger. "Counting prevents loss," he said gently. "He is accounted for." Something like weather moved in the foreman's face. "Names aren't numbers," he managed. "They are when grief must keep working." The physician replied and closed the book with the respect of a lid finding its jar. He set it on the table. The censer swung. The smoke obeyed. The cellar remembered the lesson called calm. The foreman stepped forward, then stopped. The room had been taught to narrow. Doors that should have opened made different choices. The physician passed him easily, like a man walking a familiar street. At the stairs, he paused, not unkind. "The pit will bear less weight tomorrow," he said. "Let that be your comfort." Then he climbed and was gone, and the trapdoor lowered itself with a hush. Dawn unstitched the fog, one careful thread at a time. The ledger lay where he'd left it, warm as bread. On the final line, the foreman found no name, only an arrow and a note the bell could read. "Next ground, where the earth learns to count before the priest does." He closed the book and understood that some losses could be balanced but not returned by the gate. The women asked their questions. He answered with hours and weights and the labor of lime. He did not mention the boxed eye. He could not say the word apprentice. That night the pit took what it was given. The bell chose an hour no priest would claim, and somewhere beyond the road, a quiet cart rolled toward a town whose books would soon learn tidy margins. If this tale unsettled you, like the video and subscribe to the Macabre Physician for the next case.